So I'll give everyone about a minute to join and then we'll be able to get started. I just realized I did not share my sound, so I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Please bear with us through some technical difficulties. Can everyone, can I get like a little thumbs up that you can, or someone can see my screen? Okay. There we go.
What does an engineer do at Canada Post? We are a dynamic group of 400 employees working in engineering. We design, maintain, and improve the work of over 68,000 colleagues who deliver the mail to every Canadian. We have engineers from every discipline, working in every province and territory in the country. We design buildings, automate processes, and use simulation to design and improve workflows. We use data analytics to make business decisions. We design software and hardware that is safe to use. We design logistic networks and install new technologies and equipment. We find better ways to reach out to remote communities. We focus on sustainability and continuously improve. We even help get mail to Canadians through natural disasters. We are Canada Post.
So before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that the land we have gathered on is the traditional territory of many diverse Indigenous peoples of Canada. And as we are presenting this panel today from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, I recognize their contribution as the traditional keepers of these lands and waters, and that we are gathered here today in a spirit of friendship, appreciation, and collaboration. So it has been part of our workplace culture to share a safety pause, mental wellness moment, or diversity safe moment at the start of our meetings. And I would encourage everyone here to start this practice where you are able. I'll hand it over to Pina to share a safety pause on parking. You're on mute, Pina.
Thank you, Hannah. So I'm going to talk about parking as the slide says. So I'm sure it has happened to you or you've seen it happen where a vehicle backs out of a parking space at a mall or a library or a grocery store and not seen an obstacle or a person and almost there was a near miss or someone actually got hurt or a car got hit. Parking lots are riskier than you think. Tens of thousands of crashes occur in parking lots and garages structures annually, resulting in hundreds of deaths and thousands of injuries. So when I looked up some stats on parking lots, I was pretty shocked at the numbers. So over 500 people die every year in parking lots and garages. 9% of pedestrian deaths in parking lots result from backup accidents. 20% of car accidents, and that is 1 out of every 5, happen in a parking lot. So these are almost all avoidable. And Canada Post has one of the largest fleets in Canada, and it is now policy that all employees, whether you drive a truck or not, back into their parking spots. So my safety pause for you today is to think about it next time you're going to park and take the extra few seconds to back in. It's one of the things you can do to really make for a safe journey coming in and out of that grocery store. So back into your parking spots.
So thank you, Pina, for that pause. I know I've certainly changed my behavior since joining Canada Post around how I park and my awareness. I've had to learn and practice how to back into parking spots with confidence, but it's something that's definitely saved me a couple of times. And so I would encourage everyone to do that. So as we get started, I would like to kick us off with a video message from our executive sponsors, Ian Kerr, who's the VP of Business Transformation, and Daniel Bone, our VP of Health and Safety. So please listen to their kind message.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's panel discussion on lifelong learnings and our experience here at Canada Post. I'm delighted to be introducing such an important topic that's been part of my own career as an engineer. I'm Ian Kerr, and I'm Vice President of Business Transformation at Canada Post.
And I'm Daniel Bone, Vice President, Health and Safety. I've been with Canada Post for 23 years. I've held both regional and national roles in operations, PC&R, asset management, and occupational health safety, and a few other places, mainly in Quebec and Ontario. For my studies, my path took me from the University of Ottawa Telfer to the Australian Institute of Business. I did a 6 Sigma Black Belt training, a Human Resources Organizational Development certification, a business diploma, and finally an MBA. Then I obtained my health and safety certification, which allowed me to become a member of IOSH, which is an international organization. And currently, I am working toward obtaining a diploma in health and safety.
It's important to understand that you need to continue to invest in yourself. In a world of constant change, what we know today will not be relevant for the future. So we need to keep investing in ourselves and setting up opportunities to do that. We're very strong at setting annual objectives related to the business. And I think it's important, though, that you also take a look at setting what your personal development objectives should be each and every year to move yourself forward and to continue to learn throughout your life.
I believe that when you continue to expose yourself to new concepts, it allows you to keep learning and adapt your approach. This benefits Canada Post, our team, our colleagues, and ourselves. When you finish school in your 20s, you have a lot of knowledge, but nothing remains static. The world, our work, and our life is constantly changing. And I think being in continuous learning supports all of these elements of our lives.
As a team leader, it is important that I make sure my team invest in their ongoing continued education, right? Providing opportunities through learning platforms, experiences, even different exposure to new projects and opportunities, and to platforms where they can do different courses. It's important that we are continually learning and growing, because in our day-to-day urgency of work, we may forget to set aside that time that's needed. And so we need to make it a priority, and we need to be intentional about doing it. At Canada Post, we're transforming to fulfill our purpose, a stronger Canada delivered. The business of the future will be different than the business of today. And that business will require new skills and new abilities. And it is imperative in every one of us to invest in developing both understandings of new technologies and new capabilities of software and analytics, and also to develop our business acumen and our awareness of how to effectively manage in a highly competitive environment. Without continuous learning, we will not be in the position to succeed in the future. Thank you for attending today. Your attendance today illustrates your commitment to this shared passion for ongoing learning and further exploring the possibilities within your engineering career. We invite you to continue the conversation with Canada Post's lineup of stellar panelists, all of whom embody that passion and drive and curiosity that has enabled them to further explore and expand their learning path. Enjoy the session.
So thank you to Ian and Dan for that wonderful introduction. And thank you to all of you for joining us today for our panel on leading transformation through learning. My name is Hannah Keating, and I'm the Director of Program Management for Transformation at Canada Post. I'm a mechanical engineering graduate from Western University and a recently licensed professional engineer in Ontario. I'm a passionate advocate for continuing education, both for myself and my team, and I'm very excited to be your moderator today. We hope that we will have some time for open questions at the end of the session, so please post your questions in the chat and we will do our best to respond to them if time permits. So to start off, I will ask each of our panelists to give a brief introduction of themselves and their backgrounds, and let us know what type of learning they have found the most impactful to their career development. So let's start off with Pina.
Thank you, Hannah. My name is Pina Downey, and I'm a professional engineer, and I studied chemical engineering at Queen's University. That's many years ago now. I've had a varied 25-year career, ranging from a process engineer at DuPont Canada and on to Canada Post in various roles: finance decision support, operations planning and integration, project lead, and now general manager responsible for the enterprise program management for transformation at Canada Post. So really diverse career and really exciting path along the way. So when I look back at my career, I have two really impactful learning experiences, one formal and one informal. So in terms of formal, after working as a process engineer at DuPont, really loved it. I really wanted to expand my knowledge. I really wanted to learn more about business and to build on my engineering background. And so I decided to do an MBA after 5 or 6 years. And it was really a great decision for me. It really expanded my knowledge and it really set me up for the career that I have today. From an informal perspective, in my career at Canada Post, I had the opportunity to be parachuted into a very new, different role that I never had the exposure to before. And it really allowed me to learn about a totally different area that I would not have gotten that exposure had I not accepted the position. So, my feedback to you is take on those opportunities that might be out of your comfort zone because it'll really expand yourself going forward. On to you, Saman.
Hello, my name is Salman Tayari. I'm the manager for sortation equipment engineering at Canada Post. And my background, a bit about my background, my engineering degree, I'm a professional engineer. My engineering degree is industrial engineering. I did 2 masters, one in industrial engineering and one in mechanical engineering. And my research was mainly focused on sustainable manufacturing. And I've worked in car industry, car manufacturing, as well as in a pharmaceutical plant. And since I joined CPC, I've worked in different areas of engineering to get myself familiarized with the world of engineering in Canada Post. And in terms of my impactful learning, I would say I think the first experience and the most impactful one was when I did my co-op and many years ago in a car manufacturer in Iran. And that was very good hands-on experience. And it helped me implement my engineering and ergonomic learnings and understanding real life challenges and in the industry. So it was a good learning for me. And maybe another one that always comes to my mind, there are a lot of things that come to my mind, but another one is simulation learning that I learned in Malaysia. It was called discrete event simulation. Some of you might be familiar with it. That has also had a lot of good impact on my career. Over to you, Catherine.
Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Bernard. I'm a professional engineer in the province of Ontario, and I'm also a Canadian registered safety professional. I started my education at Waterloo, taking environmental civil engineering, and then I kind of chose a different path for my master's. I liked air pollution, so I switched to mechanical engineering and did my master's in fluid dynamics. Then, from my career, I started as an environmental officer in the automotive industry and kind of worked my way up in different roles. And halfway through my career, they merged environmental and safety together. So I kind of got thrown into safety. And that's when I decided to go back to school, take my occupational health and safety certificate. And that's when I applied for my CRSP. I think in terms of my learning, I can kind of divvy it up into 3 buckets. The first one is, what I learned in school, which I was extremely lucky when I was in the automotive industry. I got to prepare all the air permits, which required modeling. So I actually got to apply all those mathematical equations to real life. So that was a great opportunity. And while I was doing that, I did noise, which, learning from peers, consultants I worked with, which now I can apply to the safety side of things. But my biggest one overall was in the conference, because you never know where you're going to learn. And had just started doing safety and in a plant that was well established. And I'm sitting there and they're talking about working at heights. And I'm listening to the speaker and he's talking about doing fall calculations to make sure that your equipment prevents you from hitting the floor if you have a fall. So I just picked an operation in the plant, and I'm thinking, I'm doing my calculations, and I'm like, I must be doing something wrong. So I redo it again. It's like, oh my God, they're going to hit the floor. So, you never know when you have those learnings, what's going to happen. So right away, all the plant, I was like, wrong equipment, we need to change it. So, that was very impactful. It stays with me, keeps me on my toes, and keeps me wanting to learn, because you never know when you're going to learn the one thing that will make a difference in someone else's life. So now I'll pass it over to Abby.
Thanks, Catherine. So my name's Abby Slater. I'm probably the only person in this panel group who is not from engineering. So I actually have a Bachelor of Science in Human Kinetics from the University of Ottawa. And then I went back and did my postgraduate diploma in ergonomics and human factors engineering through a psychology department with the University of Derby. So very much focusing on the cognitive aspect and designing for people. I've worked in the rehab industry. I've done ergonomic consulting. I've done custom orthopedics, worked in physiotherapy clinics, and I've seen kind of the whole gamut. I've seen our employees come in after injuries. And that really kind of spurred me to want to do something a little bit more preventive, which is kind of what led me to ergonomics in the first place. So for the last 5.5 years, I've been at Canada Post. Up until quite recently, I was the only ergonomist for the company of almost 70,000 employees. And I'm looking forward to seeing how we can kind of move ergonomics along. One of my most impactful learning experiences, I think, was actually at a workshop that I attended at the National Association of Canadian Ergonomists conference. And it was called Ergonomics in the Engineering Design Process. And it was such a great workshop because it really taught ergonomists how to integrate ergonomics into an engineering kind of mindset. And part of, I think, where I had struggled before was trying to convince a group of very technically minded individuals to incorporate more of these kind of odd soft skills from the psychology ergonomic side. And so it was really helpful to kind of understand how for myself to be able to kind of convey that message more clearly, and how to be able to work together. And so that was unbelievably valuable. And I'd actually attended with a couple of Canada Post engineering members as well. And we were all able to take away a lot of really valuable information. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how we can continue to learn and continue to progress as well.
So thank you everyone for those really wonderful introductions. It's always so interesting to see what different types of learnings impact different types of people and what has brought everyone to where they are today. So we can see from all these experiences that learning is important in development, but sometimes it takes extra effort from managers to empower their teams to learn. I know I've experienced that as a manager, and I've talked with many of my colleagues about how do you make space for learning. So Pina, I'm wondering if you can tell us how you create a work environment where learning is part of your team culture.
Right. So I believe that continuous learning practices in the workplace have shown to increase employee engagement, job satisfaction, and knowledge retention. So as a leader in my organization, I really believe that we need to create space and time for our employees to learn, whether informally or formally. And it has to become almost like a daily practice or an accepted practice so that employees feel valued, engaged, and we really, as a leader, I care about their development. And that really goes a long way in them being a valued member of the team. So I'm going to tell you about 3 things that we have implemented on my team that have worked really well. So we implemented LinkedIn Learning, which is a learning platform, and there are many out there. So I'm not, I'm just saying a learning platform such as LinkedIn Learning, but we implemented that one. And, there was a need on my team to support continuous learning, whether it's in leadership, whether it's soft skills, hard skills. And we wanted a self-serve access portal that people can go on when they have time and pursue areas that they want to develop in. So we purchased licenses for everyone. And, we've had such great feedback on this. We've been able to put learning paths together. We've been able to put trending topics together. And so the team, we even actually had a friendly competition amongst my directors to see who or what team would have the most learning completed. So that has worked really well, and there's positive feedback. And the second thing that we implemented that is quite in line with LinkedIn Learning is gym time. Grow your mind time. So every Friday afternoon, we dedicate 1 to 2 hours for learning. And that could be as you choose on my team. It could be taking a LinkedIn Learning course. It could be meeting a mentor that you need some extra assistance on. It's about dedicating time outside of your day-to-day work to learn. So that gym time has been really, really a popular thing that we've added to my team, and my VP, Ian Kerr, who just opened this session, also is an advocate and also uses that time as well on Friday afternoons. So the last is formal training. As many organizations do, we really support individuals who want to pursue their education more formally, whether it's a project management, professional certification, pro-sci change management certification, French training, MBA, business. I love continuous learning, and I'm always willing to support that for individuals. So those are some of the things that we've done on our team that have worked really well and easy to implement. And as long as you have the support of leadership, I think creates a culture of continuous learning.
So Pina, you've clearly done a lot to ensure the team has space to learn. And I'll admit I'm one of the directors on Pina's team, and participating in some of these challenges and changing my practices has been quite engaging and has really prompted me to learn in areas that I was not expecting to. But one of the things that we see a lot of times is organizations struggling with identifying gaps in learning. So Abby and Catherine, I know you've both had some experience developing learning programs. So can you share on some of those experiences and how you identify and manage gaps in learning?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually had developed the ergonomics in design workshop, and that was quite an interesting process. I had actually taken it over from my predecessor and it had been very theoretical in nature. At the time, I was the only ergonomist, working at Canada Post. I knew I wasn't going to be able to do ergonomics for 6,000 to 8,000 people alone. So there's hundreds of engineers that are across the country. And so what I actually ended up doing was surveying engineers following the training and saying, did this meet your needs? Is this what you need from this workshop, and what can I do to make it better? And turns out it was not what they needed. They didn't want 8 hours of theoretical ergonomics. And even as an ergonomist, to be honest, it's awfully boring. So we revamped the workshop. I actually worked with our National Learning and Development Department to try to sort of understand better how to do adult learning as well, right? And that's on its own very unique skill and something that they're quite specialized in. So that was greatly appreciated. And at the time, I was actually working with the General Manager of Process Engineering, who's now the VP of Business Transformation, so Ian Kerr, who was able to help to figure out what our engineers actually needed and what's going to meet those requirements. So we spent a lot of time going through, changing things, and adapted the workshop to have a more practical component. And I think that's a huge part that's often missing from our learning. So teaching our group of engineers how to use some of the basic ergonomic tools. How do you get the best allies to help you carry out this ergonomics evaluation? For me, engineers were the clear advocates for ergonomics, right? Very strong technical background. The requirement for that ethical consideration for practice of engineering, though, as well. And the capability of being quick learners with hundreds of engineers spread across the country. This is for sure how I figured that we were going to carry this out. So I actually delivered in-person workshops across the country, figuring out how do we make sure that everyone's comfortable using these tools. And we've now trained over 422 engineers across Canada, and we're still counting. So I think, the part that I enjoyed most about doing this ergonomics training with engineering is it's very collaborative. It's not about butting heads and having opposing views. It's very much understanding how to implement, what we need for our operations, meeting productivity, but also considering the health and safety of the employees within the ergonomics considerations. So I think, it was a long journey. But I think we've really taken it to a point where everyone's happy with the content that we're delivering. Health and safety is happy that we've got a ton of amazing engineering allies in the field. And so we're really pleased with where it's at. But I know, Catherine, you've done some general safety by design courses as well. So if you can fill us in on that.
Yeah, no, thanks, Abby. And yeah, right now we're looking at, all the success that the Ergo and Design program has had, and we're looking at expanding it to safety and design, because that's such a big piece. And, not only from a cultural standpoint to make sure everybody thinks safety all the time, but also there's huge benefits of incorporating safety early, so that we can reduce injuries and not have changes at the end once the machine is built. So we're taking all those learnings, identifying, we've got lots of programs in place, but sometimes, what we're seeing is that it's hard for people to make the link between them, or if you're new, how to navigate all these different processes. So one thing we're looking at right now is having that safety and design training to kind of walk, our project leads, our engineers through all the different processes, learn to recognize, when there's red flags. The purpose wouldn't be necessarily to make them safety expert, but to point them to the right resources, know who they can reach out to, kind of building on the success that Abby and her team built on the ergo and design, so that we can make it available. And I think one piece we're adding as well is creating the handbook like we did for the ergo and design, because, it's nice to have the training and people are retain, I will say, most of it, but often, there's a lot of information. So we're always trying to strike that balance to give you, what's the goal of training? What are those key takeaways that we're going to embed? And then, we're following up with a handbook or handouts so that there's a quick reference guide. Once you really get into a project and you're like, how do I do this again? We can direct them in the right direction.
So it's really interesting to see how much effort and planning goes into embedding that health and safety mindset and culture into our engineering culture, and how it's done through learning and through reinforcement of that learning. So I'm gonna give this question to Saman, since I know you have a team of engineers who are often responsible for designing equipment and interacting with equipment. So how does learning like this influence the culture of your team? And have you seen it change as more people have taken these types of safety and ergonomic training?
Yes, so I overall believe that understanding human factors and ergonomics is very important. It's a key to design. And all of my engineers and specialists have done the course Abby and Catherine referred to. We also do the CSA Z432 safeguarding for machinery. Safeguarding of machinery, and we will soon do the robotic version as well, most of us or some of us. So these will give us good vision when we do design. And one example of projects that we're working on is this. It's called standardization or parcel sortation standardization project. And this involves bringing consistency to many workstation designs across Canada. And for us to get there, first of all, we need a lot of training. We need some experience on different workstations and hands-on experience. Plus, we work with different stakeholders, including our health and safety team and ergonomists. And then we work together, we learn from them. That way we make sure we design safe equipment. One of other approaches is for us to attend testing. So when we go on site and test machinery, we basically put ourselves into operators' shoes. So basically we kind of understand design issues and challenges that operators face, so that way we can design safer. In many cases, we've done mock-up testing. We basically develop workstations using alternative material like wood and cardboard. We have sessions with health and safety to review those, to make sure the height, the different factors are good for the operators. So that's another one. And I can think of attending risk assessment sessions. That's also a good collaboration that we go through. And all of these overall, yes, and all of these are kind of learnings and has changed and shifted the culture within my team. So every time we are looking at a new piece of equipment or a new problem, we try to consider the operators or the end users.
So it's really great to hear that you have actually seen that change and that transformation in the culture of your team. But I think it would be remiss if we didn't go to the other perspective and say, Abby, you work with all these engineers. Have you actually seen the engineers applying what they're learning? And have you seen it change the overall culture?
Absolutely. So I've personally seen a huge difference in ergonomics and safety culture at Canada Post, even within the last 5 years. And especially with engineering. So I'm not going to lie, when I first started, I definitely felt like I was that red tape in the process, something that you had to get through to get your project going. So you had to go through the ergonomics checklist, and you had to do this. And it definitely seemed like it was a little bit of a chore. But, after deploying the workshops and the ergonomics in design handbook, taking the time to understand what, engineering needed from me, I now have hundreds of allies across the country who really truly believe in ergonomics. And some of the examples that I've had quite recently, I've had a couple of engineers who've been participating in request for proposal process. So when we're looking at procuring new equipment and across the country, and they've actually been able to catch some of the ergonomics considerations that even I may have missed, right? Because I'm not that technical when it comes to ergonomics for the engineering drawing. So I need to see something in 3D, but they can really envision what that looks like in a CAD drawing and figure out what that's going to look like when it comes to real life. And they can catch a lot of these things. And it's been fantastic to have these people that are out there, watching out for our employees as well. And I've also seen some of the engineers that I've worked with quite a bit. I like to call them my fellow ergo nerds. They're kind of helping me carry out a lot of the ergonomics and hold that flag of importance. And of course, that includes actually both of you as well, Simon and Hannah. And I know we've worked together on a ton of different projects as being amazing ergonomic advocates. I also recently had one of the engineering teams reach out. They're setting up an innovation lab to test all our new technologies and engineering advancements. And they said, we took the time to set up with anti-fatigue mats, and I've told everybody to make sure that they're doing their mini job rotations and they're doing their stretching and setting up they're building a number of test mails. So how we set that up to the ergonomic height. And they were very, proud of the fact that they took the time to think about themselves as well. I've had people stop me in the elevator and say, "Oh, you'd be so proud of me. I was camping this weekend and I raised my camping stove on a log so I wasn't bending over." And, and for me, it's just so nice to see this culture shift and how it's impacted people to the point that they're applying it just to themselves, right? And not just, for work. And so for me, that really shows that I think that culture has been shifted towards that safety mindset, and people believe it. They're not just carrying out because they have to anymore. So that's been wonderful to see.
Wonderful. And I will say I try to use my ergonomic skills in everyday life with how I move and making sure I've got my job rotations going and I'm not sitting for too long. So I've definitely, and I've seen my colleagues pick up a lot from those courses. But I know us as engineers, we can be a bit of a tricky audience, especially, adult learners as we move out of school. So Catherine, given that you're working on developing new programs and you've got that dual experience of being an engineer and designing for engineers, is there anything that you've done to ensure engagement from the engineering community on the programs that you designed for learning?
Yeah, no, great question. And yeah, it's always the right balance, right? It's getting the message right and the right format to reach your audience, because that's always something we struggle with. At Canada Post, we do have our learning and development partners that have been key even for me to learn how to develop training, because what I found is sometimes as an engineer, I come with a certain approach or background, and it's very important for me to sometimes back it up and say, okay, not everybody has the same background, same level of experience with the topic that I'm about to, convey to them. So it's trying to, and that's where the learning and development team really helped me. We even had a third-party consultant. The last one, for example, we worked on was the risk assessment tool. We have this tool, and we were finding that across the country, it was not being used consistently. And we were also seeing people, based on their experience level, their risk tolerance, were rating things differently. So, which was, it's kind of weird if you're evaluating the same process in, Vancouver, and it's judged, to be a low risk, and then the same one's done in Atlantic and it's rated a high risk. So we needed some consistency. And really, if I can give some advice, I learned a lot through that process. The first questions they asked me is, what do you want the key takeaways to be from your learning? What is your goal? And it was interesting because at first I was like, just how to use the form. And then as they asked me more questions, I started, okay, it's not just about the form. It's about, the how you use the form, why you use the form, which gives that depth to the training and allows people to kind of get, because I think as adults, we all want to know the why, right? Now, don't just show me how it works. I want to know why I'm using it. Why am I making that selection? So that was great working with them, and also having people that are not using it every day, having that set of eyes. So I would recommend to anybody that's having training to kind of get multi-stakeholders and even people that haven't seen it before. And, from my end, being the engineer, I knew I always liked the technical side of things. So we were able to give, in the examples, some more technical to kind of grab our engineering community. And we were also, because we've got some people that are non-technical using it, give other example, maybe a dock situation or something like that, that they could relate to. So having those examples and working on really what are you trying to get out of the training so that you can direct your things. And the last one is, how do you keep people interested? I think we've all taken these trainings where you're reading, paragraphs after paragraphs and you're just clicking next, not very engaging. So having that conversation about, how do you set up your training, which part is interactive, which part needs the reading, sometimes you can't get rid of it, and get that right balance to keep people interested and with the right level of information, so that at the end, we know they won't retain 100%, but if I can get the 40% that's really important across, and like I said before, give them those references. Okay, if you forget about this, it's right here, which is what we did with our risk assessment. We created an e-booklet to go along with it so that, as they get through the process, they always have that reference point. But so far it's worked well. And one thing we had done is at the beginning, we had started with a classroom setting, which was great because you could ask questions, but it was hard to schedule and we couldn't quite get always in time for people that needed it. So what we did is we transferred it into an e-learning, and that was well received because people can take it when they want, they can go at their own pace. We lose a little bit the question aspects, but we give them reference for people they can reach out to. So, we judged the content and we decided, yep, e-learning is a good module. So it's always an option to consider to make it available more broadly in a shorter time frame.
So interesting to see how platforms have changed, especially since COVID. We've seen a lot of things move online, and I know it's quite a challenge to move things to an electronic delivery rather than classroom, which is what many of us are very used to. So we've talked a lot about technical skills and learning technical skills, especially with respect to health and safety and engineering. But I know from my own experience that soft skills like influencing, public speaking, and stress management can have a tremendous impact on getting the most out of a career. So I'll throw this over to a couple of our managers, and I'd like to know, how have you encouraged your team to grow their soft skills? So let's start with Pina.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about psychological safety. So, we talk a lot about physical safety, which is absolutely very important, but I wanted to spend a little bit of time on psychological safety. So have you ever been on a team where you or your colleague has been put down or subtly dismissed or disregarded? You remember how you felt? So this creates a team culture where people are afraid to speak out. They won't be their true selves. And, who wants to be on that team? So I really believe that leaders need to create a culture where employees are safe. They feel psychologically safe. So what does that mean? So I'm going to read to you what, a bit of a definition that we use at Canada Post for psychological safety. So psychological safety is the belief that you won't be punished or humiliated for speaking up with your ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. At work, it's a shared expectation held by members of a team that teammates will not embarrass, reject, or punish them for sharing ideas, taking risks, or soliciting feedback. Colleagues who feel that their work environment is psychologically safe are more willing to engage in interpersonal risk-taking behavior that contributes to organizational innovation. So when you can really speak your mind and really be creative and not be judged for it, you're going to be really innovative, and you're going to want to be on that team. So ultimately, a leader should really strive for their employees to say, I love my job. In order to love your job, you have to be yourself, you have to contribute, you have to feel valued, you have to feel like your leaders care. So that's the ultimate goal as leaders, and that's the ultimate soft skill and emotional intelligence, and making sure your team has that feeling of safety. So I really, encourage you as growing leaders in your organizations to really think about those soft skills of creating that culture where your employees feel feel really good to be on your team and they want to be on your team because it's just going to make for a great learning environment.
Thank you.
And if I
Oh, go ahead, Catherine.
That's good. I was just going to add, like, I love what you said, and I find something, we did a safety pause at the beginning, and I found that's a tool I've used with my team to kind of get that, you can talk about anything because we do safety pauses, but we also do diversity safe moment or mental health moment to kind of open those topics. And if it can add further, one thing, we're safety professionals. So, most of the time in a project, we don't have the budget. We try to influence design. On the floor, we're trying to influence behavior. Like we gave lots of examples from our ergonomics. So I know one of the learnings that we've been discussing is, how do you have those conversations? How do you influence people? And there's a psychological aspect, a mental wellness to it too, because I think as human beings, nobody likes to piss off people, but, let's be honest here. Sometimes, when you approach someone about, you care about them and you want them to be safe and you start that conversation, they're not always receptive. So I think some of us, that's not a comfortable zone to be in, right? You want to make sure they're safe and address it and coach them on the behavior. So I know one of the training that's we're launching right now that helps that is how to have those conversations. We teamed it positive safety interaction, but it's not only directed to safety, everybody's we're rolling it out throughout, but that's the type of learning that I think that's beneficial because we talk about, yes, it's uncomfortable to have these conversations. Let's put it out there. And here are some tricks on how to prepare yourself. Yet sometimes you're not going to have it right. And that's okay, right? So kind of that it's okay, to try it, to care, and to have those things. So that's something from a learning point of view. There's formal courses, but there's also those discussions as teams. And there's also those one-on-one that I think are very valuable. If you have mentors, peers, I have that sense check. Okay, I'm aware of this situation, or I'm trying to influence this project. What do you think is the best, manner and kind of having that exchange, what works well, what might be. And I know sometimes we've had some projects where a lot of safety concerns have been brought up and it's like, okay, let's take a step back. How do we go back and communicate? So there's a lot of learning in that too. And that's good not only from an engineering project point of view, but also from a personal point of view, because it feels you more empowered to have those discussions and feel that you've got the support behind you to make them as well.
Wow, that's wonderful. Simon, do you have anything to add to that from a manager's point of view?
Definitely. So yeah, I liked what Pina and Catherine mentioned. So one was about loving our jobs. Pina mentioned very well that's really key. Like I've seen a lot of successful businesses. I study them and I realized that's the key. If people working for that organization love what they do, that's the key to success. The organization wins. And the people win as well, because we spend so many hours working, right? That's the truth about our lives. In terms of interpersonal skills, I think we always need to create meaningful relationships with others, colleagues, or even people outside our work. And for that, we need to improve our communication skills, listening skills. I think listening, when I think about when I did my first professional job, I think one of the things I needed to work on was listening, because there's always messages, lessons. So it's all about listening and receiving. So that's definitely something I recommend for everyone to think about. And we also need to ask ourselves the question of how do you see ourselves versus how how others see us. So the two images, what image we have of ourselves and the image people have of us. So it's just comparing that and analyzing it. And Catherine mentioned the why. I think for us to answer the whys, we always need to have good intentions. So whatever we do, work, engineering, design, we need to have good intentions. And for that, we need good mindsets and that requires mindfulness. And I'll be actually a yoga teacher soon. I'm working on that. And I really believe that meditation and yoga is very key to improve mindfulness, even if we can do 5 minutes, 10 minutes every day. We have a lot of distractions in life. So our brain needs to practice being present and being in peace more. And that way we will be more efficient. Our days are better. And yeah, life becomes better and we'll become happier overall. Yeah, back to you.
Such a wonderful point about mindfulness there, and so much insight in these responses. I know firsthand the importance of learning and practicing mindfulness, especially maintaining work-life balance, and especially during the pandemic, right? Recognizing when I'm not exactly myself today, or recognizing when some of my colleagues, and being aware when someone might not be themselves. So this is the end of the questions that we have prepared for the panel. So right now, the chat is open. If anyone would like to add some questions in there, you can ask about learning, you can ask about the panelists' experiences, you can ask about Canada Post. We're happy to have any of those questions. But for now, I think what I'll do is I'll throw out one of our backup questions. And this is an interesting one that I'm always interested to hear about. And maybe Abby, we'll start with you on this. So what was the most distinct difference between your academic years, right, your school years, and what the real world and career looks like? So how were you sort of least prepared for leaving school?
That's a great question. To be honest, I think when you're a student, you have a little bit of the rose-colored glasses where you have this mindset that you're going to go out and you're going to make such a big impact and right away, and you're going to change everybody's lives. And I mean, it's definitely changed since being in the workforce, but I would say the original, I guess, emotion that I experienced was disappointment. And I think that's okay. And it's totally okay to not achieve what you thought you were going to as a, very keen 23-year-old or whatever when I graduated. I think it's good to understand that it's okay to fall down and pick yourself back up and try something different. And I think a lot of that has to do with how we learn, right? So, you come up with a very theoretical basis when you exit university, but the real life is quite different. And, that theoretical learning and being able to learn allows you to be able to progress throughout your career. But I think there's a lot of real important life lessons and skills. And I think one of the biggest things that isn't necessarily taught outside of your own program is how to interact with other types of groups, right? So you do all your group projects with your own people in your own program, but they never make you do projects with people from other programs. And so when it comes down to it, when you're doing teamwork, in the real work, you still always have that one person that's just not quite pulling their weight, the same you had when you were an undergrad. Only now it's work, and you have to make something, come out of this. So I think for me, it was just understanding that, what I learned in school is important, but how I apply that and how I motivate myself to continue to learn. Learning's not done. Just because you've left with your diploma does not mean it's done at all. It just means that now you're learning something different, or you're learning in a different way, or you're learning how to teach others, right? So I think that for me was probably the thing I was least prepared for when I left school was, now what, right? What do I do? How do I take what I've learned and apply it? And how do I continue to learn and continue to have that drive to want to do something new?
And it's funny, if I can add, like for me, like you said, it's a bit of an eye opener once you hit the job market, because I remember, you're in engineering class, you're like, yeah, let's assume friction is zero. It's like, yeah, friction doesn't go away in real life. And I remember, when I was doing that error modeling, we're looking at all the emissions coming from the plant and making sure it doesn't impact, anybody around. Schools, residences, and I remember thinking, I can't quite make these assumptions because someone's life depends on it, or well-being, right? So one learning thing is pairing up with experienced people, right, and working alongside of them. So okay, I'm gonna have to, how do I set up these calculations? What assumptions can I make that have safety factors still built into it, and that can have that reasoning? So using peers or mentors to say, or even use consultants to say, does that make sense? Am I heading the right direction? Because as an engineer, you've got a duty towards the public to protect them. So I know coming out of school, I understand my duty, but how I got to it, I needed help and those additional learnings. So I think that's something I encourage, if you can surround yourself with, those key stakeholders, not stakeholders, key peers or mentors that can support you and provide that learning. And still to this day, even though I'm at the manager level now, Abby, and I are on the same team, like we bounce off continually ideas of each other. Same thing with my directors and the other managers. You learn as a group, and that sharing is so important to your growth. Even though it's not a formal course, it does, really add. So.
Okay, so we do have a question that's come in. So yay, thank you for participation. So Savan asks, how can I get exposure to leadership roles and create an impact as well as enhancing my skills? So I'll go Saman, and then Pina can answer this one.
If you don't mind, I'll let Pina answer it. And this is leadership.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pina, so how can I get exposure to leadership roles and create an impact as well as enhance my skills?
So that's a very, very good question. So my recommendation, or what has worked for me, is I've always, built my network as I've went through my career. So if I had a job that was in engineering, or if when I joined Canada Post, I joined a finance role, I didn't just stay in my lane, if you will. Like I really tried to understand, the business. I really tried to understand like the stakeholders. I really tried to understand who's leading these initiatives. So I tried to take my current role and expand it out. And that really built my network. I got to know who's who, but I also got to know how the business is running and who the players are. And you just have to really always think outside the box of your current role and how you can continue to learn and build those networks. Because once you build those networks and people get to know who you are, they'll see you in a light that's just beyond your current role, saying, they have those skills, soft skills, leadership skills that I'm seeing, because, they reached out, etc. And then, when opportunities come up, you're often, thought of because your network is built. And I don't mean, smoozing at all. I mean, really, trying to add value for your current role by expanding your network and meeting the people that, are leaders in the organization to help you succeed in your role, will help you build your network and then ultimately lead to better opportunities, in my opinion. So that's kind of how my strategy has been, of just that continuous learning adopted in my current role.
All right, so I'm sure, does anyone else want to contribute to that response?
Maybe I'll briefly say, so maybe one sentence, just work as a capacity of a leader. And that's the first step, I think. Just be a leader and the other things will come. Yeah.
And if I could add, like with my team that, I've wanted to, progress as managers. I mean, there's not always managers positions available, but things that we've done is, if there's a certain project coming up, and be like, okay, well, I'm going to take a step back and you go and run with it. And then we expose that person to, having the discussion with the union, leading a smaller team. We've even had, in the progression, hey, we're getting a co-op student. Why don't you supervise the co-op student? So there's ways you can, work on your leadership skills without leaving your current roles. And I think Pina said, like, raising your hands, like for a special project that, brings you out of your comfort zone, but also, lets you work with an area of the business that you haven't worked with before. That allows you to create that network and also to show others what you can do, right? So, so those are things within your current role that you can, work on.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so it's important to surround yourself with people that believe in you and that want to see, that want to see your career advance and that give you those opportunities, as was just said. So, it's really great, like as you become leaders, to create the culture where people are given opportunities. So it's almost like at the start of your career, you're hoping that to get more mentorship and some more guidance, but as you become leaders, to help the next generation of, giving them the opportunities to shine and to, just leader steps aside and lets their employees shine. So that's, it's kind of a twofold depending on where you are in your career, but it's important to surround yourself by great leaders.
Right, those are all wonderful ways. One other thing I will add to that is join into your local engineering, environmental, all those little committees and groups in your organization. Volunteer, that does give you tremendous visibility. Setting up a panel is a great way to develop your career skills. So we have another great question here from Vivek. So the question is, how do Canada Post employees perceive the rapid changes due to automation? That's a wonderful question. And I think, Abby, let's start with you on this one.
Sure. So, I mean, definitely we know change is hard, right? I think having to, learn any new skills, especially as an adult, is not an easy task. And I think that's something that everyone probably struggles with. Certainly at Canada Post, it's no exception. And I think we're very lucky in the sense that we do have a lot of support from our upper levels, our senior executives, being able to say, yeah, let's help teach this change, right? Let's get people through that change. We know as things progress and as we move into the fourth industrial revolution, there's going to be change. We're going to have more automation. I think from my perspective, and I've worked on a number of different projects, but I've worked quite closely with our learning and development department and been able to kind of see how we can introduce this change without making it be, big mouthfuls. So start small, right? What are the most important things we need to understand about that change? What's actually new, right? And that's one of the important things is you don't need to try to make this, extra complicated. Is what's the actual change, right? How do we manage this change from that user experience, right? And kind of pulling on my human factors background, from the user's experience, what do we need to get across, right? And breaking that down into smaller pieces, I think can certainly help. It's not to say that it becomes easy and the change all of a sudden becomes, 100% doable overnight. We know that takes time, but I think that the perception of the change is probably a bigger barrier than the change itself. And I think just getting people to understand that change will always happen and things don't stay the same, but how we decide to learn that, how we decide to teach that and foster that, that continuous learning, I think is really important. And I think we're very lucky that Canada Post is very supportive of that continuous learning, and very supportive of the employees and kind of getting that feedback. We were talking about that innovation lab earlier, and Catherine and I had the chance to go and take a look and do risk assessments and ask them a million questions that they were very patient in answering. Chat with the proposed vendors. Absolutely everything. We're going to be bringing our union safety groups as well through that same walkthrough. And I think it's just fantastic to kind of see how we're kind of fostering this change and supporting how we head to the next the next stages of Canada Post as a company.
All right, that's great, Abby. And I'm wondering, we've got like 2 minutes left. So Catherine or Saman, do either of you want to add anything to this, to Abby's comments? So they're very well thought out about change. Catherine?
Yeah, no, I echo Abby's comments, and yeah, change is not easy. I think the strategy is always from a learning point of view, and is having those discussions with the employees and explaining the why. A lot of these automation strategies will help relieve, pressure on the body of our employees, reducing injuries. So there's good messages that go along with automation. Even sometimes it's uncomfortable to go through change. I've lived it in my past life, went from an automated process to a more manual process. And, I must say employees were missing the automated process after having to do more manual work. So I think there's always, that conversation about, yeah, we know it's a change, but there's huge benefits to it. And here's some, you won't have to lift as heavy. Like one of the things we looked at are vacuum lift assess, for those large, heavy packages, because people ship pretty much anything through our network. So, having those tools there, hey, when it's too heavy, I can just use this lift and help me is huge, right? So as opposed to going home with a sore back at the end of the day. I don't know, Saman, if you've got anything to add on this one.
Like 10 seconds, Saman.
Oh, nothing really. That was perfectly covered. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so thank you everyone for joining us today. And thank you very much to our panelists for their participation. Really well done, everyone. And I would also like to express my appreciation to the OSPE team for organizing, especially Mazlina, who's been our silent partner getting this event coordinated. And then we have a few National Engineering Month sponsors to recognize. So Humber College, our champion level partners, our ally level partners, and the advocate level partners. So thank you, everyone. This ends our session. And I think the recording will be available. And we hope you enjoyed today's conversation.